It's something that I know it happens, but I don't know how to explain how I develop it. It was just a natural feeling I had, and I developed naturally by feeling, and I don't know how to explain. I drive with the throttle control a little bit different. It is a harder way of driving. It's harder, it's more tension and more stress physically, because you have to be very sensitive all the time. You have to be always very close to your maximum concentration, and so it's very tiring. But it's something that I learned during the years, and it's how I know to drive.
Well, there you go, straight from the horse's mouth. I think we don't have to do any more investigation now. Senna is as mystified to a certain extent by his own technique as the rest of us. As you see there, I think a lot of the comments we had on the video, I think I'd like to say everybody, thank you for commenting on the video and watching the video. It was a big success, but I think obviously one of the main themes, one of the main comments was he developed it in the turbo era of F1, and as you can see there, Senna doesn't cite turbo F1 as a reason why he developed the technique. He described it as something that he naturally did and sort of perfected over time. And obviously with the last video I showed you that he was doing it in karts, so we sort of needed a more general theory about this throttle blipping technique in acceleration zones. So one of the things I'd like to pick up on before we take a quick look at some comments, because I think that's quite fun, is Senna talked about the intensity, the sort of mental intensity it takes to drive with this technique. And obviously since the last video I've been practicing the technique, and though I haven't quite mastered it just yet, I'm still struggling in certain areas. I think one of the points that me and Usman keep coming back to is if you're not right at the limit, this technique leaves you sort of you're lost, because it's very difficult to go from a smooth throttle technique where you're communicating with the grip of the car, and it's sort of what you're used to in the past, how the traction works, the way that you interpret grip, it fundamentally changes when you use this technique. And if you're not really quick, it can be really difficult to sort of drive with this technique. So I definitely understood when Senna said it's very hard mentally. That made a lot of sense. I still haven't quite got it yet, but today we were working on it just in our own time. And certainly one of the things I'd like to say before I forget is the rhythmic element to it. Though I don't think Senna thought of it this way, but the throttle blips are not a million miles away from hitting a drum. So when you're going through the motions, going through the laps, there's a metronomic nature to it. Now rhythm in music, weirdly in humans, is as mysterious as driving, but there's a definite rhythmic quality to our history as humans and our development of music and communication. So I don't know whether it's tapping into that, but once you start tapping into the rhythmic quality of it, it does make driving a different experience. Whether it's better or not, I'm not too sure, but it definitely has changed the way that I think about driving. So from that perspective, it's very interesting. But I thought I'd crack on. I thought I'd read some comments from people that have commented on the post on the YouTube video. So yeah, let's take a look. So Enam Ahmed, I think he's quite a good driver in F3. He's doing really well. Now he commented on the post. I think this is Enam. Sometimes you never know with comments whether it's the person or not, but I think it is. And he wrote, okay, so he wrote, it's not true he did it in karts. It is much slower to do that in karts. I know because Terry Fulham was my driver coach. The reason why he was to do that in F1 was because the cars in those days were very heavy, and the only way to make the damn thing turn is to telegraph the throttle, or in other words, power rotate. Now F3 cars like I drive in the new era of F1 is much lighter and better setup, so throttle with that technique is unnecessary. When I won the European and World Championship in karts, anyone who did that throttle technique would flood the engine with a load of fuel. So thanks Zinam for commenting on that. I think I did reply to you this straight away, because I'm really bad. I really answer people really quickly if I've got a counterpoint. First of all, from the video that we've got, from 78, 79, it would appear that he is using this throttle technique, and in karts, and he's using it in a manner which we see him do it later on in 1992. And there's another video that I didn't put in the original video of him on a Japanese game show, a TV show, and he does it there. And what's very interesting about what he does in karts, now this is very important because I think if Senna started this in karts, and I think everything points towards that, especially what he said at the beginning of this video, which I showed, is he developed this naturally over time, something that he did naturally. In the kart, he's very quick on the throttle after he hits the brake. So usually in karts, you'll hear someone hit the brake, you'll hear the sort of the tyres grip as the brakes. It's like a for want of a better sound. And then you see someone usually coast a little bit and then progressively apply the throttle. And with Senna, as soon as he hits the brake, he's almost straight on the throttle, hit with these stabs. And I think, though I'd have to time it and really sort of try and figure out how to do this, I haven't figured out yet. I think the frequency of the stabs are a bit faster in a kart. Now, he did it in a kart on the videos, definitely in 92. Which was after his career when he was racing Terry Fulton, but the video evidence suggests that he was doing it when he was racing Terry Fulton. So the argument that this is something that was just in F1, I don't think holds up, because he did it in pretty much everything he drove. Whether it floods the engine, there is merit to that, because I know a driver that has a similar technique nowadays, and with his team they're sort of removing this style from him because it's Junior X30, I think he races in. It does have a tendency to flood the engine, so you run it, the low jet really lean. So it is, if you run the low jet really lean, you can sort of get away with it. And I also think, the speed of which he's pulsating the throttle probably negates, to a certain extent, the flooding of the engine hypothesis. The other points that you make, and very good. You said that the F1 car was heavier than, say, something like a modern F3 car, and that's not true. They were lighter in '86 than a modern F3 car by about 50 kilos. So the engines and the cars themselves were not heavier. So I think he did do it in karts, and I don't think the conditions of 84, 85, 86, 87 necessarily meant that throttle technique was developed from that era of F1. But thank you for commenting. If you want to come back at me, feel free. But the F1 cars back then were very light. He did it, I believe, and from the video evidence, in karts. So I think, despite obviously what Terry may have said, he definitely did it in karts, 100% in '92, when he was testing his home track, when they were doing the documentary, and you can hear it on the video. So next comment, redneck hippie freak. This is a completely useless demonstration. You might as well compare flying tech between a shuttle astronaut and a horse and buggy. You're in a clutchless paddle shifting simulation compared to a stick shift in real life conditions. Pointless. Well, thank you for your comment, redneck hippie freak. However, and I've stated this already, Senna did this technique in every vehicle I've seen him drive. I've never seen him use a smooth technique in performance driving. Whether it be a go-kart, be careful, kart, not go-kart. He did it in an NSX. He did it in F1, in the turbo era. He did it in F1 in the V10 era. Well, V10 Honda, the V12 Honda, and then the V10 Renaults. So he did it in everything, with whether he had a stick shift or flappy paddle. So in the sim conditions for us, we might remove the clutch, we might use flappy paddles, because we just want to remove some of the variables to make life easier for us, so we can really sort of spend time nailing the technique rather than trying to heel toe and all that other stuff that didn't necessarily need to happen for Senna to use this technique. So thank you for your comment, but I disagree, it's not pointless. Okay, next comment is from Mulholland Magazine. It says, "Hi, I actually race with Steve Nicholas, who was Ayrton's engineer and designed the MP44. If he's okay with me asking him, would anybody want me to make a video explaining what he told me, I can probably call him on the phone in a couple of weeks, but some of the information can be really sensitive, so I can't make any promises. I'll try though. Yes, please, do that. That'd be very helpful. This one's from Tire Militia. It says, simply, Senna was driving cars with light, switch power on off, stabbing the throttle allowed him to accelerate to feel the limit before the turbo kicked in turbo lag with monstrous power. Also the helping with turbo spooling. It may have helped with turbo spooling, but Senna himself didn't say anything about turbo spooling in the interview he did with the Japanese TV show. So he did it before he got into a turbo, so once again we can assume this has nothing to do with turbo F1. Unless someone has a piece of evidence that suggests otherwise, I think that myth can be put to bed. This ain't anything to do with turbo F1. Yeah, so obviously I didn't want to go into too many comments because I think there was repeating themes, particularly the turbo thing. No, I don't think it's anything to do with the turbo era of F1. I don't think Senna's comments about his own technique reflect that. A couple of people have said he didn't do it with traction control, and he did. I think there's videos from 94, 93 with him using it, certainly around Adelaide, the last race in 93. I've seen him use this technique even with traction control. So maybe by then it was less effective, maybe, but he certainly did it with when he had traction control. But did it emulate traction control? I certainly am sympathetic to that theory. I think the RPM traces do look sort of reminiscent of cars with traction control in. So I certainly am sympathetic to the idea that there's a traction control element to it, especially effective in the high speed corners where your frequency tends to be a bit higher with the stabs. So definitely there's an element of that. Secondary, there's another thing that I wanted to add. And this is probably from my own experience, is with the brake, I tend to hold the brake a little bit more now, and then I'm straight on the throttle really early, because I'm trying to emulate what he did in the car, how quickly he gets on the throttle. So as I'm coming off the throttle, there's a sort of there's a counter movement on the brake as there is on the throttle, and it could be just because I'm not quite used to it yet. But it adds in a kind of weird mid-corner stability element to the technique, and I haven't really got my head around it yet. But that's there. It's something we're going to develop, something we're going to understand. And yeah, I mean, you know, I think it's just such a unique thing to look into, because there's so many drivers, and especially with modern era of F1, where maybe the dependency on aero and the pitch of the car, the nature of electronics, make variation in driving styles much narrower nowadays. So it's very much harder to see the difference between drivers. You know, if I took two drivers, you can only do it from team to team, and ask, you know, who's who, I think people would struggle. Bar maybe Button, who was a bit exceptionally smooth, but you know, in the era of driving when drivers could really be different, you know, this is what's so great about this technique and Senna. Obviously, I'm not a big fan of over-analysis of certain things, but unfortunately, I end up finding myself over-analysing. But yeah, I'd like to say thank you for everybody that watched the previous video. I think there were some good comments. I can't go through them all, and I've replied to everybody I could. So yeah, thanks for watching, and hopefully we can do some different videos coming up, exploring some new things. So thanks for watching. Make sure you click to like the video, thumbs up, and subscribe, and click the little bell thing. I think everybody on YouTube nowadays keeps telling people, you know, hit the bell, because so if we do put up a new video, you get to have it pop up on your subscriber feed. So yeah, thanks for watching, and you know, enjoy your racing.